Welcome to Furniture Industry News. Today is Friday, July 10th, 2026, and thanks for spending a few minutes with us. There's a lot moving under the surface of our industry this week, so let's get right into what you need to know. Let's start with the mood, because it's honestly a little strange right now. A heat dome is parked over much of the East Coast. Folks are staying indoors, and they are just not out shopping for furniture the way we'd all like. Sales at most public companies are flat or down from last year. Even Amazon's Prime Day, which posted record headline numbers, saw average order values drop about 17% from a year ago. So people are still spending, but they're chasing deals on smaller stuff, not big discretionary pieces like sofas and dining tables. Between economic uncertainty, geopolitical tension, stubborn inflation, and a housing market that hit a 6-year low in May, the residential furnishings world just hasn't been able to really take off yet. But here's the more interesting part. Some of the sharpest dealmakers in the country are quietly betting that this turns around, and the biggest signal came straight out of Omaha. Berkshire Hathaway agreed to buy the home builder Taylor Morrison for $8.5 billion. What makes that notable is that it's the first major acquisition under Greg Abel, who is Warren Buffett's named successor. So the man taking over one of the most watched investment companies in the world made his opening move in housing. Dealmakers read that as a statement about where things are headed over the next several years.
And the fundamentals underneath that bet are worth walking through. Mortgage rates are sitting in the mid-6% range. Freddie Mac pegged the 30-year at 6.43% in early July. And here's the perspective piece. That's actually below the roughly 7.7% average Freddie Mac has tracked all the way back to 1971. On top of that, the country is short somewhere between 4 and 8 million homes. Millennials are aging into their peak home buying and family years. Their home ownership rate just ticked up to about 55%, and they remain the largest group of first-time buyers. And there's an enormous wealth transfer underway. The research firm Cerulli now projects that $124 trillion will change hands through 2048, with millennials inheriting roughly $46 trillion of that. None of this fixes a slow July, and the folks tracking it put the real recovery somewhere in the next 6 to 18 months. But the setup points to furniture demand that eventually has to catch up. The smart move is to position your inventory and your financing offers for a recovery that arrives on housing schedule, not this quarter's.
Now let's talk about a story that's moving fast in the mattress world. Sleep Number is in bankruptcy and heading to a court-supervised auction. And just days before that auction, the company's former chief executive made a dramatic play to get back in the game. Shelley Ibach, who led Sleep Number until May of 2025, teamed up with an unnamed investment group and struck a deal with the company's creditors. That deal gives her group a narrow window to submit a competing bid by 4 o'clock Eastern this Sunday, July 12th. To prove they're serious, they have to wire a deposit equal to about 10% of their proposed purchase price by Friday. Their bid would challenge a $415 million offer already on the table from Sleep Country Canada. In exchange for this window, Ibach dropped her emergency request to delay everything and agreed not to object to the timing later. So the auction stays on from Monday, July 13th, with a sale hearing that Wednesday. Why does this matter to you? A vertically integrated mattress retailer changing hands reshapes shelf space, promotional pressure, and supplier relationships across the whole sleep category. And whether the winner is the Canadian buyer or an insider-led group really changes how aggressively that brand competes for the same customers walking into your stores. Keep an eye on Monday because the outcome sets the tone for mattress retail through the back half of the year.
Let's shift to how shoppers are actually behaving, because there's a fascinating read on this from the data firm Circana. Their basic finding is that big sales events just aren't creating new demand anymore. They're mostly moving demand around. When the early summer promotions hit in mid-June, discretionary general merchandise revenue rose about 6% week over week, but that bump was smaller than in recent years, and the actual volume of demand barely moved. As Circana's chief retail advisor put it, the promotions largely just shifted the timing of purchases. People are becoming more strategic about when and how they spend. Circana also says the old back-to-school rhythm, the one that used to run predictably from June through August, is becoming obsolete. Now that shopping stretches from late July into September and sometimes October, the three things driving purchases today are need, value, and timing. So think about what that means. If your doorbuster only pulls forward a sale you were going to make anyway, you've given up margin for nothing. Circana expects the season ahead to bring sharper promotional peaks and deeper quiet stretches in between. That rewards retailers who build events around real need windows instead of just the calendar. And for furniture, where the purchase is already a deliberate decision, the lesson is to lead with value and financing that meets the shopper on their timing, not yours.
Now to the ports, because there's a genuinely big number here. Peak import season is arriving early this year, and July could set an all-time monthly record. The forecast calls for about 2.47 million container units in July, which would top the previous record of 2.4 million set back in May of 2022. Why the rush? Retailers are pulling goods in ahead of new tariffs. The temporary 10% global tariffs from February are set to expire July 24th, and a new round tied to forced labor could take effect in early August, hitting 59 countries plus the European Union at rates of 10 and 12.5%. Meanwhile, ocean freight is getting expensive again. One widely watched index rose to about $4,600 per 40-foot container, its highest level since September of 2024, and several carriers announced rate increases of $2,000 to $3,000 per container taking effect July 15th. Tensions around the Strait of Hormuz are keeping fuel costs and emergency surcharges elevated too. Here's the practical takeaway. The goods flooding in right now were ordered to beat a deadline, which usually means a drop-off follows. Forecasts already show import volumes falling year over year in August and September, so expect firmer landed costs and less flexibility on price in the near term, then softer volume later. Lock in what you need before that July 24th expiration, and stress test your fall assortment against these surcharges, rather than assuming rates just ease on their own.
Next, a supplier story worth having on your radar. There's a Chinese smart furniture maker called MotoMotion that recently acquired Palliser, and its board just approved a major restructuring. They're putting about $45 million from an earlier stock offering into a new domestic factory in China, expanding their operation in Cambodia, and shutting down 4 subsidiaries that weren't generating any revenue. The new plant would add capacity for 250,000 more smart sofas and 10,000 more smart beds a year, most of it aimed at North American buyers. And the Cambodia expansion is partly about reducing tariff exposure. Interestingly, none of the official filings even mention the Palliser acquisition. Here's why this matters for you. MotoMotion spent years as the invisible engine, the smart motion motor tucked inside upholstery from well-known brands. Now it's pushing its own name at U.S. retail. A capacity expansion this size, plus the move into Cambodia, tells you this is a supplier building to serve North America at scale while hedging its tariff risk. If you carry Motion or smart upholstery, the competitive picture is shifting because the company that used to just supply the engine is becoming a branded competitor.
Let me close the main stories with a compliance warning that could save you real money. U.S. Customs recently seized a shipment of kitchen cabinets coming from China. The container's paperwork claimed it held just 10 cabinets worth $500, plus a bunch of unrelated home decor. But when inspectors opened it, that decor wasn't there. Instead, they found 781 cartons of cabinets, all subject to anti-dumping duties, with an estimated value north of $120,000. Now, Chinese-made wooden bedroom furniture has faced anti-dumping duties since early 2005, so this kind of enforcement isn't new. Back in 2015, 2 companies paid $15 million to settle claims that they mislabeled furniture to dodge duties. Here's the part every importer needs to understand. If you are the importer of record, whether you buy direct or through a wholesaler, a factory's mislabeling becomes your bill, plus potential penalties and fines. With duties and tariffs here for the foreseeable future, this is a live risk, not a hypothetical. Make sure your factories, your customs brokers, and your sourcing agents are classifying every shipment correctly, and don't accept "the factory handled it" as an answer. Before we wrap, a few quick items worth knowing. On the order front, Smith Leonard's latest report showed April new orders around $2 billion, up 3% from a year ago, but down 4% for March, so the industry is still in that stop-and-start pattern. Consumer confidence ticked up slightly in June, and furniture remained the top planned discretionary purchase over the next 6 months, ahead of smartphones, though the share of people saying jobs are hard to get hit its highest level since early 2021. Housing sent mixed news, with existing home sales rising about 3% to their highest level since December, while new single-family home sales fell more than 7%. Outdoor living keeps stretching into a longer, sometimes year-round selling season, with retailers seeing Northeast sales run into October and suppliers leaning into weather-resistant indoor-outdoor designs. And on the trade front, the head of the National Council of Textile Organizations testified in Washington that the U.S. textile industry lost 41 plants over 2 years and pushed for stronger protection, arguing the right plan could double exports and create more than 56,000 jobs. Finally, mobile shopping is on track to drive nearly 60% of global online retail sales, and the reminder for retailers is simple.
Clean, validated customer data at checkout protects both your margins and your customer relationships. That's your briefing for today. If you find these updates useful, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss what's moving in the furniture industry. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.